There are moments in franchise history where a single decision separates dynasty-building teams from those that merely flirt with greatness, where the difference between hoisting the Lombardi Trophy and watching someone else celebrate comes down to having the audacity to make the move that everyone else is too afraid to execute. Right now, as the Detroit Lions sit in a position of power with championship aspirations more realistic than they've been in decades, there's a strategic pathway opening up that could fundamentally transform this offensive line from very good into absolutely unstoppable. A move so bold, it would send shockwaves through the entire NFC and make every defensive coordinator in the league lose sleep. Welcome to Lions News Fan Report, your home for the latest updated news and insider analysis on our beloved Detroit Lions, where we don't just report the news, we break down exactly what it means for our championship aspirations. Today, I need to walk you through a scenario that's been developing in the shadows, something that involves our offensive line depth, something that connects directly to two of the most decorated interior linemen in football, and something that could be the difference maker when we're facing elite defensive fronts in January and February. Stay locked in, because this is about to get extremely interesting. Let me set the stage by establishing exactly where the Lions currently stand, because understanding our position is critical before we discuss potential transformative moves. We've won back-to-back NFC North titles, we're legitimate Super Bowl contenders, with one of the most balanced rosters in the NFL, and we have a quarterback in Jared Goff who's playing at an MVP level when given proper protection. But here's the uncomfortable reality that surfaced during our Week 9 matchup against Minnesota. We lost Christian Mahogany to a broken ankle, an injury that Dan Campbell confirmed will sideline him for a long time, potentially the rest of the season. That's not just losing depth, that's losing a young player who was developing into a reliable piece of our interior offensive line rotation. The immediate response was predictable and understandable. We signed rookie guard Jack Conley to the practice squad, signaling that we'll likely slide either Tristan Colin or Kingsley Egwakun into expanded roles moving forward. Those are fine players who can execute assignments and won't embarrass us, but here's where I need you to really focus on what I'm about to explain. Fine players don't win championships against the Philadelphia Eagles' defensive front, against the San Francisco 49ers when they're healthy, against elite pass rushers who can exploit any weakness in protection schemes. Championship offensive lines aren't just competent, they're dominant forces that can impose their will regardless of who lines up across from them. Now, here's where the situation becomes fascinating from a strategic standpoint, and here's where the Detroit Lions have an opportunity to make a move that would be completely consistent with Dan Campbell's aggressive philosophy, even though it might seem unconventional on the surface. The Cleveland Browns, a franchise that's clearly in dysfunction and likely headed toward a rebuild after another disappointing season, had two multiple-time Pro Bowl guards who were potentially available at the trade deadline. Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller represent exactly the kind of elite interior offensive line talent that championship teams need, players who've proven themselves at the highest level for years, veterans who understand pass protection schemes and can execute in the most pressure-packed situations. The trade deadline passed with the Lions making no moves, a curious decision considering Campbell's aggressive nature in virtually every other aspect of his coaching philosophy. But here's the critical detail that I need every Lions fan to understand. Just because we didn't make a move at the deadline doesn't mean those players are permanently unavailable. The Browns are going to continue their downward spiral. They're going to miss the playoffs again. And by the time we get to the offseason, they're going to be in full teardown mode, trying to accumulate draft capital and shed veteran salaries. That creates a window of opportunity for the Lions to be aggressive in a way that most teams won't even consider. Let me paint you the picture of what acquiring both Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller would mean for this offensive line and our championship aspirations. Bitonio is a four-time Pro Bowler who's been one of the most consistent left guards in football for the past decade. He's technically sound, incredibly intelligent in reading defensive fronts, and still playing at an elite level despite being in his 30s. Teller is a three-time Pro Bowler who brings an element of pure power and physicality that's rare even among NFL guards. When he's healthy and engaged, he's capable of absolutely pancaking defensive tackles and creating massive running lanes in the ground game. Now imagine having both of those players anchoring the interior of our offensive line alongside Frank Ragnow, who's already one of the best centers in football. That would give the Lions arguably the most dominant interior offensive line in the entire NFL, a combination of talent and experience that would be virtually impossible to penetrate even for the best defensive fronts in the league. Jared Goff would have protection that allows him to step into throws with complete confidence, knowing he has multiple seconds in the pocket even against exotic blitz packages. Our running game, which is already effective, would become absolutely punishing with that kind of power and movement in the interior. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs would be running through holes so wide you could drive a truck through them, and we'd be able to control the clock and tempo of games in ways that wear down opposing defenses. But beyond just the on-field impact, acquiring both Bitonio and Teller would send an unmistakable message to the entire NFL about what the Detroit Lions are trying to build. It would be a statement move that says, we're not satisfied with just being good. We're not content with making the playoffs and hoping things break our way. We're actively constructing a roster designed to win the Super Bowl, and we're willing to be aggressive in pursuit of that goal. That kind of organizational mindset is exactly what separates champions from pretenders, and it's completely consistent with everything Dan Campbell has preached since arriving in Detroit about having a mentality that we're going to impose our will on opponents. Now let's talk about the practical mechanics of how this could actually work, because I know some of you are thinking this sounds great in theory, but wondering if it's financially and logistically feasible. The Browns are going to be desperate to shed salary and accumulate draft picks as they enter their rebuild. Bitonio and Teller are both on significant contracts, but they're not so exorbitant that the Lions couldn't absorb them with some creative cap management. We'd likely be looking at giving up mid-round draft picks, probably a combination of third and fourth rounders spread across the next two drafts, which is a price I'd pay without hesitation for proven Pro Bowl talent rather than gambling on draft picks who may or may not develop. From Cleveland's perspective, this deal makes perfect sense. They get out from under veteran contracts that don't align with their rebuild timeline, they accumulate draft capital to help replenish their roster, and they do right by two players who've been consummate professionals by sending them to a legitimate Super Bowl contender. From the Lions' perspective, we're trading future draft picks for immediate championship certainty. We're upgrading positions of need with proven commodities rather than hoping young players can develop quickly enough, and we're maximizing our window while Jared Goff, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, and our defensive core are all in their primes. The timing of this potential move is particularly interesting because we wouldn't be doing this at the trade deadline when prices are inflated and competition is fierce. We'd be doing this during the offseason when the Browns are in full rebuild mode and we can negotiate from a position of strength. That gives us leverage to potentially structure a deal that's even more favorable than what would have been required at the deadline. And by making this move during the offseason rather than mid-season, both Bitonio and Teller would have a full training camp and preseason to integrate into our system, to build chemistry with Goff and the rest of the offensive line, to learn our protection schemes and run blocking concepts. Let me address the elephant in the room that I know some of you are thinking about right now. Both Bitonio and Teller are in their 30s, and there's always risk involved in acquiring older players who might decline suddenly or suffer injuries. That's a legitimate concern that deserves serious consideration. But here's my counter-argument. We're not building for 5 years from now. We're building to win the Super Bowl in the next 2 to 3 seasons while our current core is in their prime. Bitonio and Teller don't need to give us a decade of elite play. They need to give us 2 or 3 years of high-level performance while we make our championship runs. And both players have been remarkably durable throughout their careers, with playing styles that don't rely on pure athleticism that diminishes with age, but rather on technique and football intelligence that actually improves with experience. The comparison I keep coming back to is what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did when they went all in to win the Super Bowl with Tom Brady. They weren't worried about building for the distant future. They identified their championship window, and they aggressively acquired veteran talent to maximize that window. They traded for players, they signed free agents, they mortgaged some future assets to create a roster capable of winning immediately, and it worked. They won the Super Bowl, and nobody in Tampa Bay regrets those moves, even though some of those players didn't have long-term futures with the franchise. The Lions are in a similar position right now where we have a legitimate championship window open. And being timid about maximizing that window would be organizational malpractice. There is also the leadership and mentorship aspect that can't be overlooked when evaluating veteran acquisitions like Bitonio and Teller. These aren't just talented players, they're consummate professionals who've been part of successful organizations and understand what it takes to prepare and perform at the highest level. Having them in the offensive line room working with younger players like Mahogany when he returns from injury, mentoring guys like Colin and Iguakun, that accelerates the development of our entire position group in ways that are difficult to quantify but enormously valuable. Championship organizations aren't just built through talent acquisition, they're built through creating cultures of excellence where younger players learn from veterans who embody professionalism and attention to detail. The strategic flexibility that having elite guard play provides cannot be overstated when discussing championship football. With Bitonio and Teller anchoring the interior alongside Ragnow, offensive coordinator Ben Johnson would have incredible freedom in his play calling. He could run any protection scheme without worrying about getting Goff killed by interior pressure. He could call aggressive downfield passing concepts knowing the pocket will hold. This move would transform our offensive line into arguably the most dominant interior unit in the NFL, providing elite protection for Jared Goff and creating massive running lanes for our backs. Yes, both players are in their 30s, and there's inherent risk in acquiring older veterans, but our championship window is now, not 5 years from now, and we need to be aggressive in maximizing this opportunity. The cost would likely be mid-round picks, a price I'd pay without hesitation for proven Pro Bowl talent. This is exactly the kind of bold, aggressive move that defines championship organizations, and I'm genuinely excited about the possibility of seeing this happen. If you want the latest breaking Lions news and the most in-depth strategic analysis, you need to subscribe to Lions News Fan Report right now. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss an update, and share this video with other Lions fans who need to understand what moves we should be making to win the Super Bowl. This is your home for everything Detroit Lions. 1. Pride.